Hey everyone, in this video we'll build a feature-rich text editor using Slate. We will add text formatting to our editor, then we will add key bindings and history features like undo and redo to our editor. Then we will implement headings, block quotes and lists to our editor. At the end we'll see how we can integrate our rich text editor with the server and how we can store and read the data from the server. If this sounds interesting, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let's get into it. So first of all, for using Slate, we'll have to add these two libraries to our project. So Slate and Slate React. So Slate is basically the general library with all the JavaScript logic, and Slate React would basically have React components which we can use to build up our editor. So once we have installed it, I will basically go here to the rich text editor file I have here. This rich text editor file is present in a form component, and that form component is basically being rendered here. So I go inside it, and right now it's empty. There is a toolbar component here which you can see here, and it has some buttons basically mapped, and I will show you that in a minute. But right now they don't do anything because there is no text editor, there's nothing. So the base component for Slate is a Slate component which we'll get from Slate React. So I'll say Slate and I'll import it from Slate React, and basically this Slate component expects two props. So one prop is the editor and one is the initial value. So first of all, I will create an editor instance and then I will pass it in the Slate component as a prop. So I'll say const editor is equal to use state. Now basically the reason I'm using use state is because I want to only initialize the editor once and this rich text editor component mounts. I don't want to basically initialize this editor instance again and again. If you want, you can also use memo, whatever you want, but I will use state. So here I will say create editor. Create editor is a function which would basically give me the editor. Now because we are using React and using Slate with React, we'll also pass this editor inside another function. So that would be with React. So with React comes from the Slate React library. I'll pass this inside it. Great. So now I'll pass this editor inside this. Now there are two more props which are required: initial value and children. So first of all, I will pass in a children. For the children, basically I'll pass an editable component which I will get from Slate React, and that would be the place where we will write our stuff related to the rich text editor. That would be the content editable basically. So I'll say editable. Great. Now let me wrap this editable with a box component. A box is just a div in Jacra UI, and I'll pass some styles to it. So I'll say border should be 1 pixel solid black, padding should be 6 pixel, height should be 400 pixels. Great. Now in the editable, I can pass some stuff as props. So there is a name prop, I can pass it a name. Let's say it should be post. Then there is a placeholder prop. I can say add post. No, I can say write post. Good. And also there is an autofocus prop. So if you want that it should autofocus this rich text editor by default, you can pass this prop. Then you can also pass some styles of your own. Here I wanted it to be border radius, not padding. Now class name. Now I will basically use emotion CSS to pass some styles. You can basically add a CSS file and attach styles using that way as well, or use the style tag, doesn't matter. Here I'll say padding should be 8 pixels, font size should be 18, and height should be 100%. So whatever the height of the parent is, it would be that. Let me place the toolbar above here. Great. Now if I go here, you'll see that there is nothing shown because there is an error. I have to pass an initial value that is required, otherwise your editor won't work. Now I'll say initial value should be equal to initial value. Now the Slate state is basically of a certain type, so it's an array of objects, and within that object you can have further array of objects, etc, etc, and I will show you the structure and you will understand better. So first of all, I'll say that this array should have an object. So the first property would be type. I can say it should be paragraph, and then children, and then inside the children the value would be an array, and inside this array there would be another object with a property text, and its value would be empty string for now. So you can see that the error goes away. Now I'm able to write in this text editor as well. It works great. Now basically the structure of the state is that I would have an array, and then inside that array I would have elements. So right now there's an object. I'm saying that its type is paragraph, so I'm saying that it is a paragraph element. Now inside this paragraph element I will have children. There can be one children or there can be multiple children with different styles and different stuff, and that stuff would be added here as objects in this array. So the sub children of this array of the editable state can be viewed as elements, so HTML elements, so paragraphs or headings, whatever. And then inside those objects there would be a children prop, and inside those children prop you can have like inline elements or text. So some text that is bold, that would be a separate object, some text that is underlined, that would be a separate object, etc. And we'll basically view it in a second and you will understand better. There's also an onChange function here, so let me show you what happens when I type something and how does the value change. This onChange function should go here in the Slate component, not editable, my bad. So if I type something like, let's say meow, and I go here, let me close this, you will see that the value is of the same type. So there is an array, there is an object, type is paragraph, and inside this there are children and the text is meow, not an empty string now. So that is good. If I press enter, let's say I remove this console data and I press enter, you'll see that now the value is 2, because now there are 2 paragraphs. So one paragraph, and in the first object the children is text meow, but in the second object type paragraph there is text is nothing because I haven't typed anything in the second paragraph. So that is how the state of this Slate editor is structured. Okay, so let me remove this onChange for now, and let's go to the toolbar component. So in the toolbar component, let me close all the other files. I am basically not doing anything special. I'm basically mapping different things. So I have a select here where I'm mapping headings. So headings are coming from this file, so h1 to h6. You can see here in this drop down. I won't go over this right now. I will go over this in the end. And then I have some other options like alignment options and other options like list and code blocks, etc. These are a little bit complex, so I will go over them at the end. First of all, I will go over these options, these 7 options. So basically these are related to text formatting. So in Slate terminology, if we format a text, then that can also be seen as adding a mark or removing a mark. So if you want to make our text underline, we can say that we have added a underline mark to the text. And similarly, if you want to remove something, we will say that we have removed a particular mark from our text. So what we will do is we will add a on mouse down function here, so that whenever we click on a button based on the ID, so basically the ID of this array, the text format options, is coming from an enum, and this enum has certain values, so bold, italic, underline, strike through. So when we would click on a particular button based on the ID, we will add that particular ID as a mark to the text, and then if we click on it again, basically if that ID is present as a mark for the text, then we'll basically remove it. So it is very simple. You'll see in a minute and you'll say, wow, that is actually quite simple. So what I will do is I'll add a on mouse down function here, and here I'll basically do that magic. So first of all, I will get the editor, the Slate editor instance here. So if you have a component which is present inside Slate component, then you can use the use Slate hook to get the editor instance. You don't have to pass it as a prop to the toolbar component or any component which is present inside this Slate editor component as a children. So what I will do is I'll say const editor is equal to use Slate. Great. Now basically I will make a function which would be responsible for adding the mark. So I will basically add it in another file. So I will go here, let me add a folder, utils. Inside this utils folder, I will add a file, index.ts. Here I'll add a function, so I'll say export const toggle mark. Before I do this, I need to basically pass in some types in Rich Text Editor. So as I told you before, we have an element here, then we have a text thing here, and also overall we have an editor. So what we need to do is we need to basically specify those types so that when we want to extend them, we can do it properly, because we will need to extend them for the formatting will do in a while. So what I will do is I'll say declare module slate. So I'll basically extend the already built-in slate types. I'll say interface custom types. Then I'll specify the types for the editor, the element, and text. So let me make these types separately. So I'll go here, I'll make a folder, types. Inside this types folder, I will add an index.ts file. Great. Now here I'll say export type editor type is equal to. So basically, if I go here to the Rich Text Editor file, you will see that the create editor returns an editor object of type base editor. But with React, if I hover over it, basically returns an editor of type base editor and React editor, because now with React has added some more things to this editor. So basically the editor type would be base editor and React editor. Great. Similarly, the type for the element would be custom element is equal to type would be paragraph, because for the initial value as well the type is paragraph, and the children would be of type custom text array. Let me define the custom text type. So I'll say custom text is equal to text string. For now, I will add more types to this and this later. So now here I would say editor should have a type of editor type. Element should have a type of custom element. Text should have a type of custom text. Great. My bad, this should be string, because type can be something other than paragraph as well. So now the error goes away as well. Great. Now I will go back to this toggle mark function. This toggle mark function would have two params. So editor, it would have editor type, which I just defined here, and then a format. The format would basically be either of these strings. So bold, italic, underline, strike through, superscript, subscript, highlight, code. So it would be either of these things. So basically, I'll make that type. I'll go here. I'll say export type mark key is equal to, it would be bold or underline or superscript or subscript or italic or code or highlight. I skip strike through or strike through. Cool. So here I'll say the format should be mark key. Great. So basically in the toggle mark function, first I have to check if that mark is present in that object or not. If yes, then I have to remove it, otherwise I have to add it, but for now I'll only add it. So I'll say editor.add mark format, and then you will have to pass a second param as well, which is not documented. So you can pass something like true, whatever. Now I'll take this function, I'll go to the toolbar file. Here I'll say const on mark click. So the ID would be rich text action, because that is the enum type for this text action. And here I'll say toggle mark, I'll pass in the editor instance, and then I'll pass in the ID. I will say it should be as mark key. I'll take in the onMarkClick function. Here I would come and I would say onMarkClick and I'll pass in the ID. Let me import it. Now I'll add a onChange function again to show you something. So great. I select the meow text and I click on bold. You'll see one thing. So if I go here now to the value and go to the children, you'll see that it says that text meow and bold true. So previously there was only one property in the text object, text, that's it. There was no bold or anything, but when I clicked on the bold button, it took in the bold ID from that enum and it passed it to the addMark function. So basically the addMark function took the selected text and in that particular object added a key value pair where the key was the format key I passed. So in this case it was bold and the value is true because now I have added that mark, which is great. Similarly, if I remove this and I click on some other buttons, you will see that other key value pairs have been added as well. So now bold, highlight, strike through, superscript are true as well, which is great. So what I would like is I would like to go to the types file and basically extend this custom text object with the properties that are being added here. So all these properties. So I'll say bold should be optional but boolean, then underline should be optional but boolean, then superscript should be optional but boolean. Similarly, subscript, italic, code, highlight, strike through. Now I will go here and I will add a isActiveMark function. So basically, as of right now, I'm just adding the mark, which is basically adding a key value pair to that text object. But what I want is if that text already has that mark or format, I want to remove it. So I'll say export const isMarkActive is equal to editor would go here and then the format. Here I'll import a class editor from slate.marks and I'll pass in the editor instance. So basically this would return the text object for the selected text and that would be an object. So I can basically pass the format key here. Let me add the optional chaining param here. So if let's say the bold mark is present on the selected text, then for that particular object, when I would pass bold here, it would return true. So that would mean that the mark is active. But if I pass something like italics to this format param, then we know that italics mark hasn't been added here. So then, it wouldn't work and it would return false. So here I would say const isActive is equal to isMarkActive editor format. Great. If is active, then I want to remove the mark. So remove mark and I will pass the format here. Otherwise it should add the mark. Great. Now if I select this and I click on bold, you will see that it has removed bold as a key value pair from this particular text object. Great. Now this adding marks or removing marks thing isn't doing any good because it is adding stuff to the object, but it's not really applying any style. Like what is that used for? So what I will do is using this object and these boolean properties, I will basically apply styles to this text. So how can I do that? I will do that by going to the Rich Text Editor file, and then this editable component has a prop renderLeaf. So here I'll say renderLeaf, and in this renderLeaf component, basically every text object is passed and we can return a custom component with whatever styles you want. So I'll say const renderLeaf is equal to this. It will have some props. I will import the type for the props, renderLeaf props. Great. So the props are attributes children and leaf. So here I'll say return span. I would spread the attributes here. I would pass in the children here. Great. And leaf is basically an object of type custom text. So using the object I will be getting and the boolean properties of the object, I'll basically conditionally apply styles. So here I'll say style, that would be an object. So I'll say leaf dot bold and font weight should be bold, and I will spread this. Great. So that would mean that if bold is true for a text object, then it should have a font weight of bold. Great. So then I'll copy this and I will add a comma. I'll save it. Here I would say if it's italic, then font style should be italic. Similarly, if leaf dot underline, then text decoration should be underline. If leaf dot strike through is true, then text decoration should be line through. If leaf dot code is true, then I want to apply multiple styles. So I'll say color should be black, padding should be 2 pixels, font size should be 12, font family should be monospace, background should be light gray, so EEE. Great. Similarly, if leaf dot highlight is true, so basically you can literally pass anything here. I'm just doing stuff based off my personal preference, but you get the idea. The possibilities are endless. So here in the highlight I'll say these two properties would remain the same. Here I would say that the background should be this is a yellowish color, and the border should have this color. This is also a yellowish color. So great. Now two things are remaining, superscript and subscript. Because superscript and subscript can easily be done using HTML tags, so I'll use that. You can do that using style tags as well, but no need to complicate things. So I'll say if leaf dot superscript, then children should be equal to, I will pass in the children in a sub tag, that is the superscript. Similarly, if leaf dot subscript is true, then I will pass in the children in a sub tag. Great. Now if I type something and I click on bold, italic, underline, you'll see that the styles are being passed, which is great. But you can see that the buttons are not being highlighted if I highlight some text which has some particular styles. So I can do that as well. I already have a is mark active function, so basically I can use that to highlight the buttons. So I will go to the toolbar function. I'll say const get mark selection props. That would basically expect an ID. That would be rich text action. Here I would say if is mark active, ID as mark key, then return. Oh, the spelling are wrong. Let me fix the spelling. Now I'll import it and I'll return some styles. I also have to pass that instance here. Otherwise I will return this, but if it is active, then I want to pass some props which would basically make it seem that it is selected. So I will give it a bluish background and white color for the icon. So I'll say color scheme should be blue and variant should be solid. So these are basically Chakra UI props. You will use props based on whatever component you are using for the icon buttons. So here I will just spread it. I will say spread them and pass in the ID. This object should be here. This would be an empty object. So now you will see by default these are all not selected. If I type something, I select the text and I apply some styles, you'll see that the particular button gets selected. If I click on them again, then they get deselected and the styles go away as well. Now applying formats or marks using these buttons is great, but that's not how people do it. People usually do it by using keyboard shortcuts. So now I'll add keyboard shortcuts for some basic stuff like bold, italic, underline. If you want, you can extend it to add for these things and these things later as well, but for now I'll add them only for bold, italics, underline. So in the editable component here, I'll pass in a prop, so I'll say on key down, on key down. I'll basically make this function here, so I'll say const on key down is equal to, it would have a type react.keyboard event handler HTML div element, because it's a div. So here I would get the event. Here I'll say const key is equal to event key to lowercase. So if key is equal to b and event dot control key. So if I'm pressing control and b, then it should toggle mark. I'll pass in the editor here, and then here I'll pass bold. So basically that is why I made this toggle mark a separate function, so that I can use it everywhere. And then I'll copy paste it. Here I'll say I, this should be italic, here this should be U, and this should be underline. So now if I go here, I select the text, I click on Control B, you'll see that it makes it bold. If I click on Control I, it makes an underline, etc. You get the idea. Now I would like to add some history features in the Rich Text Editor. So for that, you will have to add a separate package, Slate History, this. So that would basically add history features to your Rich Text Editor, like undo, redo, etc. So for that, just like I've done here with React, because I have to add some history features in the editor, I will basically pass this with another function. So I'll say with history from Slate history, and then basically I'll pass this here. Now if I go to with history, you can see that now its return type is base editor and React editor and history editor. So now it has some more methods as well, which I will use in a minute. So in the types file, I would go here to the editor, I would say history editor. Great. Now if I go here, you will see that the editor has some more methods. So I don't want to add undo, redo buttons, because that's not really how people use this functionality. People use this functionality by doing Control Z, Control Y. So that is what I will do. So I'll say if key is equal to Z and control. So if I'm pressing Control Z, then I should do editor.undo. So basically now you can see that there is an undo function added in the editor. Great. If key is equal to Y and I press control, then I want to redo. So I'll say editor.redo. Now if I add some text, let's say, and I make it bold, then I click on space and I add some more text. If I click on Control Z, then you can see that basically an undo action happens. And if I click on Control Y, then basically all the actions are reverted. So now we will basically implement the functionalities for the headings, the align options, and the custom elements like code blocks or lists. So the concept behind adding these things is the same as adding marks or formats. So basically when we clicked on these buttons, what we did was we added a mark or removed a mark. And what it did was it basically took the text object, whichever was being selected or currently present, and basically added a key value pair in that particular text object. So bold true, underline true, or it removed that particular key value pair from that object, and based on that, in the renderLeaf function, we basically applied the style. Those styles were inline styles or mark styles or format styles. However, the alignment, converting a paragraph to a heading, or these custom elements like block quotes or lists, etc., these are block level elements. So for those, the idea is the same, but what we'll do is we'll add or change properties in the element object. So basically, if I go to the Rich Text Editor component, I have an initial value here, right? So this was the text object, and we're basically adding key value pairs in this text object. But now what we'll do is we'll add or change properties in the element object, so at the element level. So if we have an h1 tag or an h2 tag or a block quote or a list, we know that that is a block level element. So what we'll do is we'll basically add or change properties in this particular object, and then we'll basically use a function just like renderLeaf to render different elements or add different styles. So let's do this. So first of all, what I want to do is, let me go to the toolbar file. Basically this is the array, and in this array we have different options. So left align, center align, right align, justify align, and then these three elements. So first of all, I would want to take care of the alignment options. So if I go to the value of these, you'll see that the value for these alignment options is left, center, right, justify, and these are the exact values which we basically pass in the text align property in CSS. So let's build this thing. So I will go here, I would copy this, I would paste it here. Instead of on mark click, I'll make a function on block click. Cool. Let me go here. I'll say const on block click is equal to id would be rich text action. For now, that is it. I will basically now make a function just like toggle mark function for mark formatting. So I will go to the utils file, and here I will make a toggle block function. So let me remove all this. So for alignment, I will have to add an align property in this element object, and then based on that align property, I'll basically add the styles on that particular element with a similar function like renderLeaf. So what I will do is I will first of all extend the type of element. So I will add an align type here. So here I'll say export type align key is equal to left or right or center or justify. Cool. And here I would say there would be an align property here which would be optional, and it would have a type of align key. Great. Similarly, I will also make another type element key. So this would be align key, or so basically just like I made the mark key and it had all the values for the marks, I would make an element key which would have all the values for the block level styles. So all these IDs, so left, center, right, similarly block quote, bulleted list, numbered list, etc. So I would go here, the types file, I'll say block quote or numbered list or bulleted list and list item. So list item would be the individual list item. So this is the element key. I will copy this, and the format for the toggle block function would have the type of element key. Great. Now first of all, I want to check if the format is an align format or some other thing. So for that, I will make a function. So I will say const is align format is equal to format element key. Here I would say left, center, justify, right dot includes format. So basically, if the format is included in this array, then that is an align format. So here I would say const is align is equal to is align format, and then I'll pass in the format. Cool. Now I will make a variable. I'll say let align, its type would be align key or undefined. Okay, let me import the align key. Cool. Now if is align, That is, if the format is one of the align formats, then I'll say align is equal to format as align key. Cool. Now what I want to do is I want to attach this align property to the element object. So I can do that. So for that I will go here, I will make an object. So I will say new properties partial element. So element I would get from Slate, and this would be an object. So basically if you hover over the element, you can see that align property is added here as well, because in the custom element type, that custom element is being passed in the Slate declare module part, where I am extending the base type of element to the custom element. So basically whenever I would import element, which is the base Slate class for the element, you would see the same type as the custom element in the types file here. So I would say if align would be by default undefined, but if it is an align format, then I would set it here. And if align, then I will say new properties align is equal to align. So whenever we would click on any of those buttons, left, right, etc., that would go in this particular object as the align key. And here I would say transforms, that is a class from Slate, dot set nodes. Here I would pass the editor class. Editor would go here and new properties would go here. Cool. So basically what it would do is it would just add the align property in that particular element which we have just selected. So let me go to the Rich Text Editor and I will uncomment this and I will show you the value. I have to add the toggle block function here as well, I forgot. So I'll say toggle block editor and then id as element key, because it is expecting the element key as a param. Now if I click on the center line button, you will see that the state has been updated, and if I go here, you can see that there is an align property added here with the value center. Now obviously just adding this key value pair won't do anything. We'll have to basically do the same thing as we did for marks, like here. So what I will do is I will add another function that would be render element. So just as the name suggests, the inline text can be considered as leaf, and whatever the block level element is, that can be considered as the element. So here we would render the element, not the text. So I would go here and I will make the function. So const render element is equal to, I will have some props here which would be of type render element props. You would get some stuff here. So we would get attributes, we would get children, and we would get element. So element would basically be the element object. Here I will make a style object where I would pass the align property. So I'll say text align should be element dot align. So whatever align property we have attached in that object, that would go here in text line. Here for now I would just do return a p tag. I would pass in the style here, so style would go here. Then I would spread the attributes here, and here I would have the children. Now you can see that whenever I click on a button, it basically aligns it. Great. Now there is one thing remaining. I need to basically highlight the button just like I was doing in this case. So whenever I was formatting something, I was highlighting the button so that I can know that is the currently selected format. Similarly, I want to do this for align as well. And I also want to add the logic where if I click on the center alignment button, it gets center aligned, and if I click on it again, it should basically reset the alignment, that is, it should go to the left. So I need to do that as well. So for that I will make a similar function just like I had for marks. So is mark active? For this particular case I will have is block active. So this will be is block active. Let me paste it down below. So the format would be element key. Let me remove this. So here I would say const selection is equal to editor. I will get the selection from the editor. If there is no selection, then I want to return false. Great. Now just like we did for the marks thing, we basically took the marks for that particular text object and passed in the format as the key, and then saw if that particular mark is present in the editor or not. We would do a similar thing here, but with slightly different logic. So I will do editor.nodes. So basically editor.nodes would give me the nodes which are corresponding to a certain match function. So I will pass in the editor. Cool. Then here in the options, I will have two parameters. So first parameter would be at. So where do I want to basically use this match function? So for that, I will use a function unhinged range. I'll pass in the editor and the selection. This would get me the range in which I want to apply this match function, and that is basically where the selection is. Here I would get a match function which would basically be run for each node, and I have to return true or false. So for nodes where I return true, those nodes would be returned. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find the node in the selection which has a particular format selected. So for example, for the left align button, I want to see if the currently selected text has an align property which has a value equal to left. So that is what I will do. So here I would say return editor.isEditor node. So first of all, I want to see if the node is not an editor, and element.isElement. So we have text node as well, where we are applying the mark formatting. So I don't want that particular node gets here, because that is a node as well. And final check, I will say node align is equal to format. Simple. So what this will return is a generator function, as you can see here. So I will basically convert it into an array using array.from. Const match is equal to array.from. So if I do get a match, if there is at least one item in the match array, I will return true. So if there is a node in the selection inside the Rich Text Editor which is not an editor, which is an element, and whose align property is equal to the format of the button, then that button should be selected. So I can use that inside this as well to see if the currently selected format is active or not. So what I'll do is I'll say is active is equal to is block active editor and format. Now if it's active, I want to set the align to undefined, otherwise it should be format, because if an element has already an alignment center and I click on the center button again, it should reset the alignment to undefined, otherwise it should add it here. So that is what this is doing. Similarly, let me go to the toolbar and add this logic. So I will copy this, and here I would say get block selection props is block active, and this would be element key. I would copy this and this would go here. So spread this and I'll pass in the ID. So now it is center aligned, and you can see that the center button is selected. Similarly, if I click on left aligned, right aligned, justify, whatever, that particular button is selected. So for the toggling to work properly, I will say if is align, then I should set the new properties align key. So if I have a selected text now and I click on the center alignment button and I click on it again, it would basically go to whatever the default alignment is, and the default alignment is left. Great. Now I would like to implement headings. Now for the headings, the logic would be kind of similar, but we would change it a bit. So first of all, for the alignment, what I was doing was when I was clicking on a button, I was adding an align key in the element object. For headings and for all the other stuff like block quotes and list, I would not do that. I would basically change the value of the type property. So right now, if you look at it here, you will see the type is paragraph, and in the initial value of the Rich Text Editor as well, I have the type paragraph. So what I want to do is I want to change the type based on the thing I select. So if I, let's say, select h5, what I want to do is I want to change the type to h5, and then in the render element function, based on the element type, I don't want to return a paragraph, I want to return an h5 element. So right now you can see that I am just returning a p tag, which is the default behavior. What I will do is here I would add a switch case statement. I will see if the element type is h1, h2, block quote, etc. And based on that type, I would render that particular element here. So not just a p tag. So that is simple. I will just have to make some tweaks. So I will go to the utils and I want to do one thing. So I will add a type key here. So let type would be string or undefined. So, I will add a type property in the new properties object so that it can be added to the element object. Else type is equal to if is active, then it should be paragraph. So if, let's say, the element is already an h1 element and I click on it again, then it should basically toggle it back to paragraph. Otherwise, if it's not active, then the format should go here. And here I would say if there is a type, then add a type here. The type should go here. Yeah, simple. Now I also need to do one thing. I need to go to the toolbar and add this toggle block thing inside the select, because right now the select has nothing. So here I would say toggle block, and this would be e.target.value. So I have an headings array and it has basically got keys from h1 to h6. So whatever value I will select, that particular key would be assigned as the type. So if I select meow and I click on, let's say, h4, you will see that the type is now h4. If I change it to h6, now the type is h6. Great. So what I need to do is I need to go to the Rich Text Editor, and inside the render element function I have to add a switch case. So I'll say switch element dot type case h1, return an h1 tag. Let me return this actually. So return this and let me change this to h1. Let me copy this and add it as a default case. So this would be default. Similarly, let me copy and paste this 5 more times. So then h1, this would become h2. Similarly, this would be h3. This would be h4. Now that is actually the h6 heading. If I go and let's say click h1, you'll see that the element has been converted into a h1 element, which is great. Similarly, the alignment and everything would work as well. Now one more thing, inside the is block active function. Right now I'm just checking the node align property, but I only need to do it if the format is an align format. If the format is not an align format, then I need to check the type. So I'm changing two properties of the element. Either I'm changing the align property or I'm changing the type property. So if the format is something among these, then I want to check if the node align property is equal to the current format. Otherwise I want to check the type property. So here I'll just say const is align is equal to is align format const block type is equal to, if it is align, then the block type or the property would be align, which I will be checking. Otherwise it should be type. So the block type would go here as a property. Now let's implement block quotes. So for block quotes, I don't need to do anything special. I just need to add it as a case here in the render element function. So I'll copy this, I'll paste this here. This would be block quote, Here I would use the block quote tag. Now I would like to add some custom styles to the block quote. So obviously I can do that because this is a custom functionality. I can do whatever I want. So I will add an object here. I would spread the styles. So these are the element styles. Here I would say border left should be 2 pixels solid DDD. So basically I will want to add a border left of a grayish color. Then padding left would be 10 pixels. Color would be grayish. So AAA. Font style would be italic. So these are my styles. You can add whatever styles you want. Now I will select this text. I will click on the block quote button and you will see that it has converted this into a block quote. And I have a border here and I have a text with gray color and italicized style. Now the only thing left is adding the list items. So that is slightly different. So for that I will go to the utils file and I will need to do a bunch of things. So before applying any kind of list style, I would want to unwrap the nodes using the unwrap function. Otherwise you will see that if you add some kind of formatting after you have applied the list formatting, the formatting would be weird where everything would be indented by 20 pixels or something. So first of all, whenever you want to apply a list format, you want to unwrap the nodes. So you will do that using the transforms function. So unwrap nodes, editor, and then similar match function just like we had above. So let me copy that. So let me add the match function here. So I want to unwrap the nodes only if the node has a list format. So for that I will make a function. So just like I have an isAlign format function, I'll copy this, I'll paste this. This would be is list format, and here I would have two values, so numbered list and bulleted list. So basically these are the same keys which we have in the constants file. These are the same IDs for these two options, so bulleted list and numbered list. So I will take this as list format function and I will add it here. So node.type and it should be equal to isAlign format as element key. Cool. So if there is a node which is not an editor and it is an element and it is a list node and the current format which I have applied by clicking on the button is not an align format, then I want to unwrap those nodes and then I will wrap the nodes again if the current format is list. Now I'll say if is not active, so right now it's not a list, then what I want to do is I want to convert it to a list. So I'll say is list. So let me make this variable similar to this. I'll copy paste this. This would be is list format. The type would be list item. So just like for headings, I just passed the format as is and that was the type. What I would do is for list, the type would not be the format, the type would be list item. And then I will basically wrap this list item with the list. So now I will add a block. I'll say the type should be format and the children should be empty array. And then I'll say transforms.wrap nodes editor block. So whatever type I'm setting here would go here and that would be the type for the element object, and I will wrap that with another block where the type would be format. So the format would either be bulleted list or numbered list. Cool. So now I would go here to this portion and I would add three cases. So first case would be numbered list. So that would be OL, simple. Similarly, I will have a bulleted list. That would be UL, and then I will have a list item this would be li. Now if I go to some text I selected and I click on the bulleted list, you'll see that a list has been added, a bulleted list, and I can add an items and the list goes on. Similarly, if I select everything and I click on the numbered list button, that list gets converted into a numbered list. Great. Now the final thing remaining is I will add the logic for sending the rich text editor data to the server so that it can be stored in a database, and then reading the rich text editor data from the server, because that is important. So for that I have first of all got a dummy server here. So that server isn't really doing anything, so its initial value can be undefined. So what it would do is it has two endpoints, a get endpoint, so that would be used to get the data, and then I have a post endpoint, and that would be used to send the data to the server. And basically I would just take the variable I'm getting from the request body and assign it to this text, so that can be emulated as a database. And I have two queries and mutations as well. So if I go to the API folder, I have a query. I'm using 10 stack rec query, and basically I'm hitting the data endpoint, I get request, and here I have a mutation. I am making a post request to data and I'm sending in the text. So what I will do is I will take in the state, which is an array of objects. I would stringify it and then I would basically send it as a text in the mutation. Let me first convert the rich text editor component into a reusable component. So I'll add some props here. So first prop would be name, second prop would be placeholder, then initial value, and then on change. No, initial value won't be a string. Initial value would be of type descendant. So descendant array, and then the value would be of the same type as well. So if I go to the rich text editor Slate component, you will see that the initial value has a type of descendant. Similarly, this value is of type descendant as well. So descendant is basically a generic type which encompasses this. It can basically be used for this state as well. So I would extract the properties. I would go here to the component. I'll say name, placeholder, on change, initial value. So name and placeholder would go here, name, then placeholder would go here, placeholder, and then the on change function would go here. So on change value. Great. I would close these. I would go to the form component where the rich text editor is present. Let me close all the files. Let me go to the form component. Here I have the rich text editor component. Let me add some props. So name would be post, placeholder would be write post, on change would be for now an empty function. So const on change is equal to an empty function, and initial value would be initial value. So let me copy it from here. Where is it? Yeah, so I'll get this from here. I would paste it here. So initial value would go here, and then I would pass in the initial value I'm getting as a prop. Cool. Now here in the form component I'll have a state. So I'll say const value set value is equal to use state. The state would be of type descendant as well, and initially it would be undefined. So set value would go here. So value, set value, and this would have a same type. Let me copy this, and it would be here. Cool. Here I would import the mutation. So I'll say mutate async is equal to use update data, and this would be save data and is pending. So I would add a function const on save. This would save the data and I will pass in the value here. I've started the server. I'll basically add a button here. So button, I'll add a top margin here. I'll give it a color scheme. It would be WhatsApp so that it should render a green color. So I'm using Chakra UI for the library. You can add anything you want. Here I will have an on click. So on save would go there. Here I will have some text. So based on if the mutation is going or not, I would say if is pending is true, that is if the mutation is going, I would add saving here, otherwise save. Now I'll add some text here. I will, let's say, make it bold, underline. I will centerline it. Now if I click on save, you will see that basically I have sent an object where the children property has an object where the text is meow, bold is true, underline is center. Great. Now what I need to do is I need to send a query to the backend when I initially mount the component and get this data and pass this data as the initial state of this component. Now the Slate component isn't a controlled component, it is an uncontrolled component. So you can see that there is an initial value prop here, but you cannot change the state of this Slate component by changing the initial value. So this is an uncontrolled component. So you can pass an initial value to it, but once an initial value has been passed, you cannot do anything. So I will go to the form component. Here I would say const data is equal to use data. That is the query. Here I would get the is success. So what I need to do is here in the initial value, I would say if is success is true, that is the query has fetched data, then I want to pass the data or the initial value. So in the start, if I go to the server, you can see that the value is empty. So in the start, if the query has fetched data and the data is empty, then I want to pass the initial value, which is this, as the initial value of this component. Otherwise, it should be undefined. Now here inside the Rich Text Editor, I will say if initial value is not present, then I want to return null. So I don't want to render anything if the initial value is undefined. And when will the initial value be undefined? When the query hasn't fetched the data and query is still running. So now if I refresh it, you will see that whatever data that I saved last, which is coming from the server, is being shown inside this component. Now I can make further changes. I can, maybe convert it into a code block, save it, and then refresh it. And then you'll see that this thing persists and I'm able to get the data from the server and show it in the Rich Text Editor. So that is it for the course. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. That motivates me a lot to make more videos for you guys. As always, keep supporting and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.